So I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight, Mr. Rich Herink. Rich and his wife Linnell are from Lincoln. So we have a lot of first times tonight, and this is the first time YCP Omaha has had a speaker from Lincoln come present to us. And he was recommended by a few people that he'd spoken to a Legatus chapter before on his experience and how mentors have really guided him through his life. And how, that experience for him might be able to translate into us as we grow through our careers and transition and look for the people that God's put in our life for a reason. So with that, please give it up for Rich Herink, Market President of First National Bank.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. In the back, can you hear me? It's a privilege for me to be here. I'm not on the speaking circuit. I don't do this very often, but I have a couple of things that I've learned about life and about the experiences that have led me to believe that, number one, you never turn God down. I don't know the reason tonight why I was asked to be here, just as you don't, but we're all here, and I don't think that there's coincidences in our spiritual life. So I'm here for a reason, and you're here for a reason, and I'm certainly glad to meet all of you. A couple observations. I was impressed at Mass. I can tell that you're all very mature. You're not just mature individuals by your age or your education, but I could tell that you have almost all of you that I saw in there, you have a mature faith. That was impressive. I watched as some of you reverently prayed before Mass. I watched as you went to communion. You're well formed for your age and state in life, and that's very impressive. And that's noticeable. And I want to thank you for that and appreciate that. And it ties in to what I want to just briefly talk about tonight, because why do we as faithful practicing Catholics, why do we do this? And how have we gotten to where we're at? And we all know that God speaks to us. We're usually waiting. Very few of us hear it directly. But we know that God speaks to us through His holy word, the Bible, and we know that He speaks to us, to some people, through revelation. We know that He speaks to us through the magisterium of the church. But for most of us, I really believe He primarily speaks to us through the people He puts in our lives. And for that reason, a couple other things that I've learned through my life experiences, not just that there's no coincidences, but that every person is truly a gift. Truly a gift. And so I never miss an opportunity. Whoever appears in my life, whoever I'm introduced to, whoever calls me, I never take that for granted. There's a reason that God has allowed that interaction at that point in time. And that's the attitude that, as I've matured over 64 years, has led me to come so fully to appreciate the Catholic Church, the wisdom of the Catholic Church, and how when you fully embrace it, life as a Catholic is such a gift and it's so amazing. And, that's another one of my tenets. The average age here is probably late 20s. And in a minute, I'll tell you where I was at age 26, and it wasn't sitting where you're sitting. So the fact that you're there already now, you've got a great head start, and there's a reason for that. God's got great plans for all of us, but, especially for you. And I believe there's miracles every day. I talked to a couple of you about that as we were speaking, about if you just sit back, we don't always notice them. We have to reflect on those. And sometimes we have to reflect, and the best way to do that is usually in silence and in prayer. So God puts people in our lives. And in my walk in the Catholic faith, I really do believe it has not hindered me professionally. I think that it's just been part of how I've grown up. When I say grown up, I don't mean grown up by age 20, I mean grown up by age 64. I've had a career in banking since 1974. I work for First National Bank of Omaha, but have never lived in Omaha. I've been president of our bank in Lincoln for 17 years. Before that, I lived in Norfolk, Nebraska for about 25 years. All three of my children went to college in Omaha, one at UNO and two at Creighton. And I think we're still paying for, we're all paying for that. And I have two sons, married sons in Omaha with 5 grandsons and and another grandbaby on the way. And then I have a daughter and a son-in-law in Portland, Oregon. But, what's inspired me, and if I was talking to your parents and grandparents, I would be talking to them about making sure they leave their faith, that the life of faith that's been weaved together for them, that they let their children and grandchildren know why they are the way they are. For example, my first memories of prayer are not with my parents or with my grandmother. And my grandmother was this goes back to the 1950s. She was an unbelievable woman. She was the oldest of a family of 12, ninth grade education. Then she raised 9 children, and she had 56 grandchildren. And I was the one that lived the closest to her. I got to see her the most as a little child. And her mouth was always moving. She went from cooking to cleaning to back to cooking. I mean, she was always in service to other people. But her mouth was always moving. She was praying that rosary. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as a little boy, we would pray the rosary. If you stayed overnight, you would do it again if you're old enough to stay up till 9 o'clock, because that's when she did it with everyone that was in her house. I had uncles that were 18 and 20 years old when I was 8 and 9 years old, great big strapping guys. They got down on the kitchen floor and said the rosary with their parents, my grandparents. But that memory of prayer and devotion to prayer has stayed with me, and it's come and gone, because I can't say that I've been consistent with it. But you know, every time you fall, I like to think I fall forward instead of backwards, because when you get up, you're another step closer. And so that's another thing that I've learned. We fall every day, but if you keep falling forward and you pick up from where you left off, and that's another great thing about the Catholic Church. We're always given that opportunity to start afresh, anew, every day. So that's my first memory, my first mentor. My second mentor was a priest that probably baptized some of you, Father Eugene Kerwin. So, and as I'm mentioning these people, I only mention it so that it triggers in your mind. If you're a person of prayer, and I can tell you are, who planted that seed? And don't ever forget them and pray for them. Well, when I was a little boy at age 9 years old, Father Kerwin, who was the founder of St. Robert Bellarmine, prior to that was pastor of the little parish at Lee, Nebraska, St. Mary's. And I was, in those days, we started serving Mass very young. But he taught me a reverence for the Mass. He made sure that as altar boys, we understood what we were doing, that we pronounced our Latin very carefully, and that we knew what the words meant. And it was a reverence for the Mass, and that never left me. And so many times people aren't brought up that way, that they truly understand what the Mass is. I could tell all of you understood that. Somebody has planted that seed. You've been well formed. And then your examples. I can guarantee you that people, when you go to Sunday Mass or any Mass, there's other parishioners noticing your reverence, etc. So you're already mentoring just by your actions and your attitude. Go a little bit further along. I graduated from college in the early 1970s. My first landlord asked me what faith I was. I said Catholic. So he checked it. He said, "Okay, you're going to live here by yourself?" "Yes." He said, "No girls ever, day or night?" I said, "Okay." And then he said, "Now listen, you don't have to join the Knights of Columbus, but you have to come with me to at least 3 meetings." So his name was Augie, and at age 22, right out of college, I couldn't get into trouble if I really, really wanted to. And so I've been a Knights of Columbus member since 1976. And just as you're finding community in this group, that was the first, that was community with obviously groups of men ages 20 to 90. But the fact that I consider that a great blessing. He was a retired farmer, bib overalls, and served as an altar server at daily Mass every day. And great memory of him. He died way too young and had kind of a tragic end to his life. But then, I kind of got sidetracked. I never quit going to Sunday Mass, but I let my prayer life lapse. And since it's Easter, I'll just tell this story, how easy it is just that we can all fall. I remember going to Mass on Easter Sunday, 1979, and I had not acknowledged Lent, other than to go to Sunday Mass, 1 hour a week. I had not acknowledged Lent the entire time. I didn't go to church on Ash Wednesday. I didn't do any sacrifice, prayer. I didn't go to do anything during Holy Week. And I mean, I can remember sitting in Mass on Easter Sunday, 1979, and saying, I will never let this happen again. So instead, and I didn't. So that was a turning point that was just a great gift from God. So, I picked it up, and then in the early 1980s, then I was married, we were starting our family, and we were in the great big Sacred Heart Parish at Norfolk, 2,500 families. And there was one day at Mass, a guy grabbed me by my coat, and he said, I want to have coffee with you this week. And his name was Mike, and he had been a polio victim, but he was a local businessman, pretty successful, kind of crippled, 6 children, big family, lived a little bigger than life, and he would pull people out of Mass and find them ways to get involved in the parish. And he was a mentor of mine for about 10 years. And he's well known. He received a lot of recognition in the Omaha Archdiocese over the years. He's another man that died way too young, died at age 53. But again, a mentor. God put somebody in my life. First it was Augie, then it was Mike, and just pull me out. I mean, there was nothing that was, subtle about it. Nothing subtle. He just grabbed me. I was probably holding on to 1 or 2 kids. And there were other people that did that, throughout my life. And then a key time was when my wife and I made retreats in 1988. We were in our mid-30s, and that's when the concept of study hit me. And we had an excellent speaker that talked about study. We're brought up in our faith, we pray, we go to Mass, we receive the sacraments, hopefully, but have we really learned the faith? I was impressed that you have a few minutes out of the catechism here. Again, how many people do that? But that's when I made a commitment in the 1980s that if I was going to be Catholic, and I believed that the Catholic Church was the way that God was giving me to get to heaven, I was going to know the faith. And so I've been studying ever since, and the more I study, the more amazed I am, of what God has given us and the amazing wisdom and the tradition of the Church. And so I would take that, seriously, and in moments of conversation, you'll mentor people all your life, because most people, even most Catholics, do not know what the Church really believes, teaches, and stands for. And so we need people that understand what the Church is asking us of us and teaching us and asking us to believe. The next revelation that really hit me, and again, ever since 1979, I've taken Lent very seriously. Well, one year in the early 1990s, I was trying to go through my checklist, do I give up peanut M&Ms or regular M&Ms? And for some reason, it just came to me, I'm going to go to confession every Friday of Lent. Now, I had never done that in my life. In fact, I had fallen into the habit of going about twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. I always went in, I always confessed the same sins, and I had done them all 3 or 4 times. Father, it's the week before Christmas. My last confession was Holy Week. Here's my sins. I've done them all 3 or 4 times. Well, I went to confession the first Friday of Lent. I hardly could think of any sins to confess. The next Friday, I had sins to confess. The next Friday, I had sins to confess. On Holy Week, I said my confession in tears to Father Boozy, and I couldn't quit saying them. And I've gone to confession once a week ever since. And people ask me, because I do talk about that a lot to my friends and a lot of people, that confession has probably changed my life for the better more than any other thing in the faith. And they say, well, how do you find time for that? You run a bank, you serve on boards, you have you have a family. I said, well, there's 2 things to remember. One, when you go every week, you don't have to think very long about your sins. I mean, they're right there. And 2, the lines aren't that long. It doesn't take very much time. And everybody has to do it their own way, but that has changed my life more than anything from a faith standpoint. And that's part of the beauty of our faith as being Catholics, is that we recognize what sin is and that we are sinners. And today that is such a foreign concept in the secular United States. One, that there is sin, and two, heaven forbid, we're not sinners. So we're countercultural we're countercultural for being Catholics, and we're countercultural when we start to say, I understand that. You know, I know that I sin. I'm going to confess it, and I'm not going to be discouraged if I confess the same sins next week, because we're human. But one of the things that I found interesting is that when I started going every week, I still had the same sins, and I was still saying 3 or 4 times. So what should I have been saying when I was going every 6 months? 300 or 400 times? I mean, you know, it put it in perspective when you really can think back on 4 or 5 days. What are your behaviors and what are some things? And you also get more sensitive to sin. That's probably what helped my marriage, helped me in my other relationships, helped me work with my employees. Because all of a sudden, you're thinking of things like, I really ignored that person when they wanted to talk. Or I really hurt that person's feelings with some harsh words I said. I didn't have to be that harsh. So you think about things that come out that actually can really, and of course, I was talking to 1 or 2 of you about your Jesuit background at Creighton Prep. You know, that's all part of the examination. So, you know, again, what a blessing from God. And then from that, I just kept getting drawn in to organizations. I was fortunate to be a charter member of Legatus in Lincoln. I'm a Sarin. I'm a member of the Equestrian Order, Knights of Columbus, active with the Focus Missionaries, and I'm a Benedictine oblate. I'm drawn to the Benedictine spirituality of combining prayer and work. It's a real discipline that you think about every day. So, you know, I get to do amazing things with my family. I've had fun in my career. I've had positions of responsibility. Next year I'm going to be board chairman of the Nebraska State Chamber of Commerce. I'm board chair of CHI Health right now because I'm a layperson, but I have a real commitment to Catholic health care and a Catholic stain in health care. So I spend a lot of time at that. But then, so I just throw those things out there. That you think of, that you remember the people who planted seeds and who have been your mentors, who will be your mentors, and that don't forget that you're already mentoring other people. The fact that you're here tonight in this organization is an amazing gift. And, and support each other. You know, the beauty of the Catholic faith is that we should worship and we should pray in community. That's why Sunday Masses in a parish family is so important. But get together in small groups. You know, I would encourage you as you get to know people that you get together and have Bible studies or get together 15 minutes early for lunch one day and just go through, you know, whatever it is about your faith. But form those groups and you'll be stronger and you'll be mentoring each other and people will start to reach out to you because I believe people are drawn to people of faith, to spiritual people, without us being, all we're doing is going about our life in the way that it's intended to be. I mean, most people that work with me know that I'm Catholic. Most people that know that when I walk up to St. Mary's Church at noon, I go to Mass at noon many days across from the state capitol. Most of my employees know that, and it's not a big deal. Unless I have a lunch appointment, that's where I go. But you know, at our bank in the last 6 years, I've had 2 male employees convert after 10, 15 years of marriage to Catholic women. And part of it is because of knowing me and knowing that a Catholic man didn't have to be, you know, before that I think they had an image of something that they didn't want, they didn't want. And maybe it was spirituality of any type. And so many of them have never known a man that truly is spiritual and lives his faith and tries. And so we've got I have 2 employees that are very happy to be Catholic, and I've worked with both of them about 10 years. I'm going to open it up to any comments. I'd like to, because again, all of you have inspired me tonight. But don't be afraid of what God is asking you to commit to. And I can tell that I made that note without knowing you. because a lot of times young people, they really want to take another step forward, but they don't want to get drawn in too much until they get older. You know, I'll get really active when I'm in my 30s, or I'll get really active when my kids get in Catholic grade school, or I'll get really active then. But you know, we never know. We never know. I've been going to funerals of friends since I was 10 years old, and you have too. So you just, you know, and besides that, we miss the opportunity to grow personally, and we miss the opportunity to help others grow. So take it step by step. You know, when you feel God's calling you, take a big step, and don't wait to be perfect. You know, that's another thing I like about Pope Francis. I mean, he's not asking us to be perfect. He's asking us to move in the right direction, and get in there. And don't assume it's easy. You know, sometimes people want to talk to me. They say, well, it's easy for you. You make enough money that you don't struggle. Your kids were smart enough, they all went to college. You know, you haven't had to go through a divorce. You haven't done, you know, so it's easy for you to be a good Catholic. Well, it's not, granted, God's blessed me every day, but maybe I've not gotten divorced because my wife and I are both committed to a Catholic marriage and a marriage for life. So maybe, you know, so don't assume it's easy. And maybe my kids went to college because of the commitment we made to Catholic education and the tuition dollars that they knew we were sacrificing, that they took it seriously. So I don't think for a minute that I'm lucky just because I'm Catholic. So, but with that, this is, you know, you're all part of an amazing organization. I can tell that you've had great parents. You've had people in your lives that have been important to you that have done great things. And you're our future leaders in this diocese, future leaders in the church, and I just applaud that. So I'll open it up to any questions. You know, again, professionally, I don't think being an active Catholic and an inspired Catholic has hurt me in any way. And I think there always, especially when you're young, you're worried about wearing that on your sleeve. And I don't wear that on my sleeve. I mean, I have Catholic customers that when we go out to lunch, expect to say grace. But if I don't know people, you know, I don't do that. But you'd be surprised, though, how many, once you get to know them, want to do it. You know, and so God puts people in our lives, and He puts you in other people's lives. You know, Jeff Slattery you know, Jeff came into my life 3 years ago, just out of the blue, and I just found out tonight. He told me he was praying for my wife 2 years ago when she had some health issues, and I haven't seen him in 2 or 3 years. Isn't that amazing?
This is a dual question, but did you recognize these people as your mentors at the time, or was it kind of looking back on life and recognizing them? And then the second part is, how can we be more intentional in seeing people as our mentors or seeing people that we can mentor?
I don't know that I recognized it, although I was not resistant to it. You know, and sometimes, I don't know, sometimes, you know, people have a natural hostility and resistance to anybody that tries to impact their life. I have one child that way. I mean, you know, he's not an easy person to mentor because he just doesn't want that input. So when I was, you know, when I talked about, and you know, it's kind of a blessing. Sometimes it's a blessing being kind of a nerd when you're young. So when we were learning Latin at age 9 to upgrade to be good altar boys, I probably tried harder than most of my classmates. I mean, there was something in me that wanted to do it for Father Kerwin, or there was something in it that I didn't want to disappoint my grandmother, but now by the time I was in my mid-30s, and Mike was pulling me out of Mass one day and said, I want to have coffee with you and talk to you about getting involved in the parish, then it's pretty obvious. So I think depending on our state in life and who we're talking to, sometimes we have to be subtle and we may not recognize it. But you know, all of you are have your antennas up, you know, so you can see that. But think about all of your friends who maybe haven't been to Mass in 5 years, and, you know, haven't prayed in 5 years and are just totally not focused on any type of spiritual life, will they see it? So how do we do it so that they see it a little bit? And so I'm kind of like most of you. I mean, most of my life, almost all of it, I was not totally away from the faith, and I was always around people of faith. So that's a blessing, and God gives us that blessing for a reason, and it's not to put it under a bushel basket. And being intentional, that's a great word. My wife uses that word a lot. And at various steps as I progressed in my spiritual life, that being intentional to study, to really understand the Bible, to read the catechism, to study, pick out other things, whether, I read most of the books that St. Pope John II wrote, and just continually learn. So, anything else?
One more question?
Yes, sir.
How do you evangelize in the workplace with also keeping, a kosher work environment?
I never bring it up, although I have employees that do. And I probably got the biggest compliment that, and again, I'm a grandfather, but in a bank, you have lots of young people working, and tellers, personal bankers, etc. But I actually heard this. We'd had about 4 young women get pregnant in a row, which means they're all gone for 12 or 16 weeks. That's a hardship for everybody else. But the attitude is when somebody tells their branch manager that they're going to have a baby, they say, "Oh, let's go tell Rich. He'll be so excited." And so you see, it's little things like that. Is by embracing that. When I find out I have a young woman pregnant at the bank, and with one exception, they've all been married. But I mean, I'm overjoyed for them. I make sure that there's no resentment from the company towards them that they get 16 weeks off. So you just kind of have that culture. But no, otherwise, I have a 45-year-old lady that's not Catholic, but she's very involved in Bible study and Bible education. And she and I are good friends. And she comes in a couple times a month and tells me she's been to this conference or that conference. We have a suite at the Pinnacle Bank Arena. And and one of the, there's all the concerts and the basketball games, but there's a big spiritual conference that's held there every year. And I always make sure that there's a group of our older female employees that always like to go to that. So always make sure they get the tickets for that. So you can do a lot of things, but I've never taken out, or just like the 2 guys that converted to Catholicism. But if they bring it up, I don't evangelize them. I try to. I mean, it's your attitude, and your commitment to being a good person. And if it comes up, take it. Just follow, see where it'll lead you. But I never sit down with someone and say, "Are you going to church?" or, And it's the same way when they're getting married. When I have young employees that I find out are getting married, I make a point to congratulate them on and they might be getting married, on the football field at Nebraska, or they might be getting married at, someplace 100 miles from a church. But I congratulate them for making a commitment and moving forward with their life. And that kind of spreads through the workplace. All right, well, thank you for letting me be here tonight. You did me a big favor. Thanks.